Linda Buchanan is our scenic designer for Richard III. This is her debut with the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. And we are incredibly lucky to have Linda here, as well as the whole design team that Joe has assembled. Linda is the head of design for the University of DePaul in Chicago. She is a major designer in Chicago, but in New York and all over the world. And really, that is, you know, we often say, oh, they're a really major designer. You look at her bio, it's absolutely no exaggeration. She works all over the world. It is a joy to bring designers with that kind of background and depth of experience to our company. Next to Linda is our director, Joe Hanreddy, also making his debut with the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. Joe's career is pretty much the same. It's just a fantastically varied and interesting career. For 17 years, Joe was the artistic director of the Milwaukee Repertory Theatre for almost 2 decades and really has built it into what it is today. He's now gone off to get away from administrative work and freelance all over the country, as well as, these days, doing his own adaptations of productions. Pride and Prejudice, his adaptation, with, I think you said 30 productions of it now? 30 productions of Pride and Prejudice, done recently at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Utah Shakespeare Festival, South Coast Rep, an interesting tie-in. Eva, who's just come in to play Margaret, was in Joe's production of Pride and Prejudice at South Coast Rep, although neither of them met each other. So playwright, director, and now man about town without a job. I just love it. And I want to, Jamie Hanreddy, Joe's wife, is here too, visiting for the week. And Jamie, it's great to have you in town. And of course, needing no introduction at all, sitting next to me, a man who's worked in the company since he was 20 years old. Actually, I thought you were 18 at the time, but you're old at 20. Lynn Berg, who is playing the title role. To know of. And Joe, I want to just jump right in with you and lead us into this production. You know, there are a number of places we can start. You know, this gigantic text, second only in length to Hamlet. And then, of course, I want to go into the design decisions, particularly the contemporary setting of the piece. So,
well, as far as the text goes, if you were to do Richard III uncut, we should start now because we would barely be done by midnight. It's probably about, well, it's a little, that's an exaggeration, but it's about between 4 and 4.5 hours uncut. So the first thing is to relieve you that it's not going to go that long. It's going to go about but any production of Richard III, by nature, is selective in an adaptation because nobody's using all of the text. So one of the things that did interest me was kind of taking this big play, making it comprehensible to an audience that did not see the first 3 plays that lead up to this. One of the things that Richard III is, it is the 4th play in a 4-play series, a tetralogy, one more than a trilogy. And the Henry VI plays, Henry VI, 1, 2, and 3 lead up to this. And this character that Lynn plays, Richard of Gloucester, starts his journey in those plays in Henry VI, Part 2. So this is the culmination of all of those plays. Yet, Charlie said rightly that they're not done very often. Everything I've read says that Richard III, I don't know how they quantify this, is one of the most oft, if not the most oft-produced play of Shakespeare's world around the world. So obviously there is a common response to the play, and people see something of their own times in the play, and it has been the most popular of Shakespeare's plays since really the remounts in the Restoration period. So every time finds their own time in Richard III, and that in some ways led to the decision of setting it as we do today. It's in a contemporary setting. It being a history play, history is somewhat relative in the play because it is written in the Elizabethan times. Elizabeth, who was the queen when Shakespeare was writing the play, is the granddaughter of Richmond, who becomes Henry VII, who kills Richard III in our play. So Shakespeare, in many ways, is talking to an Elizabethan audience about the beginning of this tutor line of royalty that culminates, that goes from Henry VII to Henry VIII, whom we all know had 6 wives and had a troubled reign, to Elizabeth I, who has also a very troubled reign. And one of those issues is the legitimacy of the bloodline of her owning the crown. So that starts all the way back with the beginning of the War of the Roses, and that's what all of the starting with actually Richard II, going all the way through 8 plays, which comprise all of Shakespeare's histories. And this is the culmination of that. This is when the new reign starts. So in adapting the play, of course, we want to make everything clear so that you do not feel like you have missed something coming in. I'm reasonably confident that the issues that are in the play will be clear to you. And that has involved somewhat almost a literary heresy of not only cutting Shakespeare, but rearranging the scenes and in some cases adding a little text here and there to try to make things understandable and comprehensible, and much more than that, compelling and meaningful to you. We also, about the history is, I can't tell you, not accurate. History has a point of view. And Shakespeare, writing in the reign of Elizabeth I, is in many ways trying to legitimize that tutor reign. And one way of doing that is discrediting the York line, of which Richard is the final king. So whether or not Richard is guilty of the heinous crime in the play of killing the 2 princes is a very debatable point in history, and is something that began to be propagated in the reign of Henry VIII, who was clinging somewhat desperately to his reign, and Thomas More, of A Man for All Seasons fame, either wrote or copied, we don't really even know, a history of Richard III, which was, if not slanderous, certainly condemning of Richard III. So when we choose what point of view we're going to do, we have our modern times, and we have certainly our share of sociopathic dictators to choose from. Referencing the Elizabethan times, which has its own political agenda, talking about all 200 years earlier, when Richard starts to reign. So you have all of these different points of time talking to each other. So I thought our most easy, accessible access to the play was to set it today, which doesn't mean that we're trying to tell you that times are just like they were in medieval times. They're not, although there are certainly common threads, which makes the play universal. But looking at people that you can recognize, and looking at hierarchies that you can recognize, because in the costuming, it's easy to make a distinction between social characters and taste and manners and personalities in modern clothes that we're all familiar with. If somebody's got a loud tie or a checkered jacket or a leather jacket or a slicked back hair or wears sunglasses, all of these little things that we have to understand personalities are much easier understood than an extra kind of little brocade coming out of the Elizabethan period or some sort of military hierarchy that you don't completely understand. So we decided to set them on. The other option is to invent a period, which means that you have to invent all sorts of military ranks and distinctions, and it makes it a little bit more of a fantasy to me, and also sometimes lacks an authenticity that I thought was valuable to the play. So that was sort of our starting point, and Linda and Martha Halley, our costume designer, talked about that. So Linda and I got together, and we started talking about movies and a film. And
oh yeah, we actually, I I said that reading the play, the character of Richard was reminding me of Ian Richards' character in the British version of House of Cards. Because he's such a wonderful villain, yet he seems he's so solicitous to everyone, and he's this older gentleman, you know, and you don't really understand that he's just this really, like, he throws a woman over the edge of the building and says, I had to do it. It was for the good of the country. So, so we got into that, and then we started talking about, you know, what the architecture would actually be like. And of course, you know, there's quite a few different locations, so you have to kind of think about how do you want to kind of change the space at all to indicate different locations. But we started talking about what the architecture would actually look like. And we looked at things like the photos of the fall of Saddam Hussein and the pulling down of the statue and that kind of thing, and other dictators. And then we kind of thought about also corporate takeovers and that kind of headquarters. And then I was really attracted, and so was Joe. He said right away he was interested in steel and glass, and I was too, both for the kind of coldness, sharpness of it. It's got a bit of a fortress feeling. It feels military. It could be a prison. It could be, a military headquarters. And also just the fragility of the glass in a way, because there's a line that you have about, you know, if the heirs are not killed, your
kingdom stands on brittle glass.
Stands on brittle glass, yeah. So that combination of materials seemed really kind of right. Both, you know, like this facade that looks really strong and imposing, but it's built on nothing. It could just shatter any time, you know. So we started to go that way, and I just started looking at glass and steel architecture, all different kinds of modern glass and steel architecture, and we were particularly attracted to the Pittsburgh Plate Glass Company headquarters in Pittsburgh, which is all glass, and it's got these millions of towers, but these very kind of medieval-looking, pointy. And that building is all black glass, so we really liked that. So we tried to pull that shape in somewhere because it has a bit of a reference to a period architecture without really being totally in that period.
Is that striking? The set is striking, as you will see in a moment. It's also monumental in size. Feels like it's monumental in size. That's a trick that Linda is incredibly good at, I have to say. And you'll see what I mean when you look at it. The impact of it is that it's huge, and then when you really examine it, you realize, wow, it's not as big as it actually feels. But one of the things that I find really striking, you know, if you think of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, right, it has these specific qualities. It has a deck to act on. It has an inner below, which is an inside underneath a balcony level that creates interior scenes from below, a balcony level, and inner above, meaning in the balcony you can move back and be coming from a room, right? Side entrances, front entrances. It is exactly what this set has. It is it's every entrance of the Globe Theatre, essentially, right? And I have to say that we all find ourselves at the Shakespeare plays, you almost always end up with that shape, no matter what you start with, because the plays demand it. There are some of the plays that don't require balconies, very few. But this one, but you would never think of it looking at it at first.
Well, there's 20 scenes in the play, I mean, that's even some fewer than Shakespeare wrote. Yeah. So what the directors are always trying to do is to make these scenes flow cinematically from one to the other, because the language wants to flow. With 20 scenes, you don't want 30 seconds in between each one of those 20 scenes while you're assembling a whole new set and then start from scratch. These things want to tumble forward, and we kept looking for ways in which we could make the last line of one scene be the cue line for the first line of the next scene, because there's a rhythm between the scenes. In a couple of places, we've got maybe a 5-second change while people come on, but the rhythm of Shakespeare is just so essential to its momentum and its velocity.
But Lynn, let's jump into it. It's your first title role. It's a great role. What's the experience been like? What's the journey?
It's, well, first of all, Joe was so generous and wonderful about keeping me in the loop and I've been invited to a design meeting with, a director's design meeting and stuff. That was so interesting. And then to sort of be with it the whole way through, by the time we got to rehearsal, it was, okay, we're finally going to do this. I've been sitting here with the script for the last 3 months by myself, learning it, imagining who I'm going to be with, imagining what the scenes are going to look like, whatever. So finally it was like, here we are. Now we're doing it. We're really doing it. We're in the room doing it together. The nice thing about it was that being able to have all this time with Joe to talk before rehearsals, the great thing was that by the time we got into rehearsal, we'd done all the work, really. So it was just like, okay, let's just get up and do it. Let's just get it, put it up on its feet. You don't have to worry as much about me. You can focus on other people. So then we can get this thing going.
I think our audiences often, understandably don't really know what that process is. But essentially, it's a process of interpretation, right? And so you're having to agree, ultimately, as a director and design team and actor. You're having to agree with each other's interpretation of the text. And that's everything from how to phrase the text, how to actually speak lines of the text, which will change the meaning. Two, also agreeing in these very basic ways that I'm happy to come into the final scene, the war at Bosworth Field, with a machine gun and helicopters over us, and say, "Oh horse, my kingdom." Now, I bring that up because that I will guarantee you I will get emails about. And the email will say this: "It was an interesting production, but I cannot watch a play in which you say, a horse, my kingdom for a horse, and there's a helicopter. End of discussion, period. I won't come back again." I'm not exaggerating. And those are the people that get it in their head that whatever the text is, whatever my beliefs of the historicity of the play are, I can't get beyond it. Now, clearly, it isn't an issue for any of us. But one does need to agree. And if you've got that agreement going in, and you've spent that time together, then you're free in rehearsal to explore the relationships with the other characters, right, with the other actors, which it can feel in that room for weeks, like you're just getting to the point of speaking to the other people, and then you hit the stage, right? Lynn, this role, though, is a little different. And it's different in some very specific physical ways. And that is something that every actor has to make a decision with the director about. And also figure out how to do. Describe what decision you guys have come to with this.
Well, we started when we were discussing things. Joe's stand was that it not be something that's hideous and out there, because he felt that it would put too much distance between the audience and the character.
Well, there's a contradiction in the character.
Yes, yes.
Which is that he's a great warrior,
yeah,
and he's disabled. Yeah.
And he's also
so one of your major problems is to reconcile those two things. I mean, he's a war hero.
Yeah.
And he was born with whatever condition he had, because that's totally in the text, that he came out of the womb. Actually, the way he's described as coming out of the womb was his mother was 2 years in labor, and he came out feet first and with teeth.
Yeah.
You've incorporated that.
Yes.
So describe, because, some of us be thinking, what's the deal? Describe what the physical attributes of Richard are.
Well, one of the things that was helpful was with the bones being discovered.
Yes.
We decided that whatever we're going to do is going to start with, okay, the spine has to look a certain way, which is curved, and the only thing we're changing about that is that the curvature, I think, was on the right over to the right hip, and I really didn't want to throw in having to do things with my left hand. I'm right-handed. I didn't want to have to be doing things with my left hand to add insult to injury. So instead, we changed it to the left. So I thought it might be interesting to have the arm twisted under. I've seen people having, you know, their hands bound up or something, and I think it was
Anthony Scher did it with
and
two
he did it with
canes.
the two canes, and who's the guy who's, oh goodness, who's doing Richard III? This
Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey did it, but one of them had like a fake tiny baby hand, which was interesting, but like that was, you know, withered, very withered. But we, you know, so we have a twisted up shoulder and arm and a hump, and my arm is all shaved, which is really strange, because we have it looks like a burn or something on the arm, something to create something that's withered, something that looks rotten and gross.
It's a horrific
It's
scar.
a horrific scar right there. And then to twist my left leg in, and I have a lift in my shoe, and to sort of help tilt my pelvis. So basically the spine is sort of going like that. We're trying to create that image.
I was interested in two things, and
Yeah.
everything that Lynn said. On a psychological side, I thought it was helpful if Richard saw himself as more of a freak than other people saw him, because there's a certain self-condemnation that disabilities are magnified. And certainly, he's not the most well-liked guy in the play. And so the insults that come out, the vitriol that comes out of Margaret and other people, are there to weaken him psychologically. And so they're going to take whatever disability or whatever bit of self-loathing that they can detect in him, and they're going to be in there to make it as bad as it can possibly be. And on the that's on the psychological side. On the practical side, I didn't want Lynn to get stuck with a choice that some 14 or 20 or 34 performances later was going to require deep massage every day to be able to get him out the next day. And I only say this in a half-kidding way because he's out there for 3 hours. Well, I didn't know. So he's only out there for 2.5 hours. 2.5, relax.
With intermission.
Yeah. More often than not, this play will run 3 or a little more. He's off for very, very little time. And that's going to magnify itself. And there's also stairs, and there's rakes, and there's a whole bunch of other things. And you don't want to get into something that you're going to regret after a while, or it's going to cause pain. And that is because this play's done a lot, and we all are in Shakespeare circles, and we all know actors and directors who have done this. And in the middle of a run, a guy can't get out of bed. Because you're trying to twist yourself in a way that just the body doesn't want to go. So we also, Lynn had Lynn, I didn't set it up, but to see a physical, we saw a therapist.
Saw a physical
Therapist,
yeah.
to make sure from the beginning we were on. Lynn was great, sent a couple sketches of ideas that he had for the silhouette of the body, and then Martha, who is in New York, right? We weren't able to work as much person to person, but Martha and I have done the costumer, and I've done decades of shows now, and she was able to then have a lot of advanced mornings, exactly how to mold things, especially in a modern silhouette of a suit that was going to, get the most out of it and be as believable as possible.
Lynn, do you find, because it really is, it's the most extreme kind of character you can play. I mean, the Elephant Man, and we know all about the actors who've done that, same kind of issue, lots of problems for people. But does it, is it helpful to have that as an actor, that extreme physical, external piece?
Absolutely. In a way, you kind of just let it do the work for you, because I don't feel miserable, but miserable in it. It's actually we've designed it in such a way that I'm not in pain. I don't feel any discomfort, but it's sort of once I lock into it, it's everything that I've designed and my way of playing and stuff all sort of comes out of that. If that makes any sense, you know.
Lynn, you know, the other thing about these characters that is very different than most of what we play until you play a Hamlet or a Richard III or a Lear. You have a body of gigantic speeches, right? Of soliloquies. Now, Richard has a very particular thing too.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what it means to speak to an audience in a way that, and that voice, and what these speeches feel like.
Richard, the thing that was so frustrating in rehearsal was not having an audience for those soliloquies, because they're so about like connecting with people. The thing that's so great about the Richard, the role and the play, is that the text is so, there's something about it that can be so naturalistic, or that's so, it's very muscular, and it, particularly in those soliloquies, it really requires having a connection with the people in the room with you. The audience, they're Richard's co-conspirators. They're the people like, I'm going to go do this thing. Now watch me do this thing. And this is, they're the people that Richard, you know, comments, you know, has his observations about the world, about life and everything to the audience. They're his only friends. So to not have that in rehearsal was very tough, and I'm really looking forward to having people.
No, it's very different, right? You can play all of Hamlet with zero contact with the audience. There isn't a speech of Hamlet that is clearly directed to the audience, right? Now we don't tend to play Hamlet that way. We tend to play him with a distance between us and the audience. In Richard, though, we do what we call breaking the fourth wall, right? The imaginary division between the audience and the actor, which no other character in this play will do except for you. And you will turn straight to us and acknowledge that we're sitting there, in essence. Breaking completely the whole compact between a character and an audience. Is it a shocking? Well,
I don't know yet. I'll find out in a couple hours.
Good. Well, we'll see if he starts and stops and goes, I can't do this more. James?
I have to ask, now if I remember right, you guys had decided that you were going to do Richard III, and it was after that they found his body.
Well, not technically. The thing is, the body was found about 2 years ago. And then it took another year before the DNA test, you know, with the guy here that, you know, confirmed it. So the truth is, no. The picking of Richard III had absolutely nothing in the world to do with the bones.
Well, that's what I figured.
Just
came. Had an impact when you're ramping up for this. They find him, they confirm it, and then, I don't know if you saw, I saw in The Guardian, they did an artistic reconstruction of his face.
Yeah, right.
What he really looked like.
Oh, I read all those articles in The Guardian. You know, I was just really intrigued by them. I read them all. They have absolutely no bearing on the production. But I was fascinated by them, of course.
They decided to set it in a parking lot.
Right. That's exactly right. And ironically, James, everyone's saying to us, my God, what a gift for that to have happened. Sales of Richard III must have gone crazy. The thing is, it hasn't made the slightest bit of difference. You know? It's like, whatever, some bones are found, and, you know, some people think it was Richard III. Oh, well. I mean, it's fascinating to all of us who are interested in history. Great. But in relationship to the play, you know, whatever. Yeah. Other questions or? Yes?
I'm curious, Joe, if you're also a historian.
A historian?
Do you study history? How do you know so much about the history of this play? Did you have to learn?
Directing plays, you know a little bit about a lot of things, and not a lot about anything. Really, you know, it's really the work itself that creates your own curiosity, and you dive in and you read everything you can, you steep yourself with that, and then you go on to something else, and it's gone.
That's one of the great things about doing theater, is that every project is just an excuse to go do really cool research.
Yes. Thanks, you guys. Well, listen, Lynn, have a blast tonight. Joe, thank you so much. Linda, great to have you here, and we'll all enjoy our production.